What is the final game? Episode 9 of Squid Game begins this finale just like it started, with a look at the rules for the Squid Game played as children. Two competitors remain for this final challenge, Sang-woo and Gi-Hun. It all comes down to this. They're going to play Squid and each will be on opposing sides of offense or defense. Gi-Hun, however, chooses offense. With the VIPs watching from above with interest, the front man adds extra narration, confirming that this game is the most physical and violent from childhood days. There are few rules with this one, but only a few. Gi-Hun has a pocket knife, which he intends to use to try and win this game. As rain falls, the two men slug it out. Stiff punches are traded, while Sang-woo manages to grab the knife and stab Gi-Hun several times. It's not enough to hit the killing blow though, which Gi-Hun thwarts by biting a chunk out of his opponent's leg. He wins the final game. Using the knife stuck through his hand, Gi-Hun pulls it out and looks set to stab Sang-woo but decides not to. He lets the man live while Gi-Hun walks to the finish line. But he can't cross it. Instead, he decides to enact Rule 3 and end the games right here. In doing so, this means he gives up the prize money completely but saves his friend. Only, Sang-woo forces his hand and stabs himself in the neck, telling Gi-Hun to help his mother before passing away. As he does, Gi-Hun wins by default. With the games over and Gi-Hun blindfolded, he sits in a limo with the front man. In-Ho mentions how these games are akin to betting on horses before eventually drugging Gi-Hun and pushing him out into the street. Inside his mouth though is a credit card. Gi-Hun uses the card inside the terminal and checks out his balance. His PIN number: 0456. He withdraws 10,000 won, leaving him with 45,999,999,000 won, $48 million. Does Gi-Hun manage to help his mum? Following this ordeal, Gi-Hun swings by the old neighborhood and finds Sang-woo's mother. She hands over some mackerel, while Gi-Hun remains silent, unable to tell her the heartbreaking news about her son's fate. Gi-Hun heads home, where he finds his mum lying on the floor. Despite doing all he can for her, his mum has passed away. He holds her as best he can, struggling to hold back tears as he mourns her passing. Unfortunately, Gi-Hun has not been able to help his mum, who has clearly passed away. Has Gi-Hun paid off his debts? We then cut forward 1 year later. Gi-Hun is a changed man, and is called to see the bank manager. He wants to try and help him grow his financial assets, but Gi-Hun is having none of it. He hasn't touched the money since winning it and instead asks the bank manager for 10,000 won. Heading down to the docks, he uses that to buy a rose. Only, attached to that rose is a black envelope with a red ribbon. Inside is a business card with the words December 24, 11:30 p.m., Sky Building 77th floor written on. And the sender, Ugambu now. Although we're not explicitly told, it would seem like he hasn't paid off the loan sharks or his bank loans. Having said that though, the latter could well have automatically been dealt with through the small amounts of interest accumulated in his account. Is Il-nam still alive? Gi-Hun arrives at the lavish apartment right on time, where he finds Il-nam alive. Gi-Hun is completely shocked, unable to accept that this man is alive. However, the shocking truth is that Il-nam is actually a part of all this, and helped to set up the games. As he says himself, he makes a living out of lending money to others. He called Gi-Hun over, because he's noticed that he hasn't spent any of the money he's won. Il-nam quizzes him, believing Gi-Hun is suffering badly from guilt over all those who have lost their lives in the games. This would also explain why Gi-Hun is still scrounging a living. How did the games start? Now, based on what Gi-Hun found in the archives and Il-nam's little monologue that follows, it's safe to assume that these games started back in the early 90s. Since then, there's always been one winner, and it seems like that winner could well go on to become a figurehead staff member like frontman, given In-Ho won the games 1 year, or be sucked back into the games one way or another. Back then though, Il-nam and a whole bunch of rich buddies got together, and decided to come up with a more productive way of spending their money. With more cash than they knew what to do with, they all set up this series of games. The VIPs are actually those in charge of the games, betting money on people like horses. They created this game as a way of having fun. Gi-Hun is pretty disgusted, but Il-nam is quick to remind him that 93% of people willingly signed their contracts again, knowing exactly what lay in store for them from these games. Why did Il-nam join the games? Well, the background behind Il-nam's inclusion was a lie. There were some things that still rang true. He has a tumor, he's dying and doesn't have long to live. Il-nam decided to join in and play the games this time. He wanted to feel a sense of joy in engaging with others, rather than just spectating and dying. After all, if he's going to die anyway, why not feel some sense of joy in the process? If you recall, while playing red light, green light during episode 1, the man had a big ol' grin on his face the whole time. Joining in playing with Gi-Hun during the 4th challenge allowed him to remember all the moments he had forgotten in his life from such a long time ago. This is why Gi-Hun was able to progress forward, and why Il-nam sacrificed himself. Although this gunshot was obviously a decoy. As the clock chimes midnight, Il-nam passes away, for real this time. Now, Il-nam being part of the games also explains why he initially chose not to continue playing during the first episode. Given this is supposed to be a democratic process, he didn't want to impede on this. One further flashback also shows that he's also colloquially known as the host of the games, which explains why the frontman took over in his absence. How does Gi-Hun react to this news? With Gi-Hun finally learning the truth about the games and their origin, he undergoes a drastic transformation. He gets his hair cut and dyed red, heading off to Halchil, Se-byok's brother. He brings her to Sang-woo's mum, and asks her to look after him. As he walks away, Sang-woo's mum opens the suitcase to find it completely packed full of cash with an accompanying note. It's the money I owe Sang-woo. En route to the airport, after ringing George Eong, Gi-Hun notices that same sleazy businessman from before playing with the poor guy outside. Exchanging slaps and smacking envelopes, Gi-Hun charges across the platforms, but misses the man as he boards a train and escapes. For the unsuspecting victim, however, Gi-Hun snatches his business card away and demands he not compete. At the airport, an enraged Gi-Hun rings the front man and promises that he'll pay for what's happened to him and the others. Instead of boarding the plane, he turns and walks away, determined to fight back and put an end to this once and for all. What an agonizing cliffhanger. So Squid Game bows out with an open ending, one that gives some crucial answers to some of the big questions, but leaves things on a tantalizing cliffhanger too. Will this be renewed for season 2? Much like Alice in Borderland, this show has a lot more to give, and the idea of extra games, more insight into the other VIPs and taking down the hierarchy, is something that promises lots of maneuvering, if this is renewed. In terms of final twists though, the revelation that Il-nam is still alive, and actually one of the key players behind everything that's happened is a real hammer blow to the gut. It's definitely an unexpected turn of events and one that does show that there's some good left in humanity, especially given the way Gi-Hun helped the old man out in the games. Il-nam's insider knowledge also explains away a lot of his hints and tips, along with knowledge behind different parts of the games as well. It's a small inclusion, but one that feels pretty consistent with the show's narrative as a whole. The Junho angle is another nice touch, although by the end there's lots of big question marks around how the front man feels about killing his brother, and how he's affected by this. That's to say nothing about how he's able to slip back and forth between the island and Il-nam without arousing suspicions, especially given he's supposed to be missing. Despite that though, Squid Game bows out with a decent enough finale to this unusual and utterly engrossing show. Roll on season 2. Why is Squid Game so popular? Squid Game is a Korean Netflix original that's on course to become the most popular show the streaming giants have ever produced. Sporting 9 episodes clocking in at a little under an hour each, this is an easy show to get into and a difficult one to put down. So how has this Asian series managed to grow into this unstoppable behemoth? Is it a stroke of luck? A viral trend? Or has the writing been on the wall for a while? Across this article we'll dive into all the reasons why we think Squid Game has become revered the world over. FOMO is more commonly known as fear of missing out. In its simplest form, this relates to social anxiety stemming from the belief that others might be having more fun without you. In other words, it encourages you to get involved as well for fear of missing something special. This is essentially the core ingredient of viral trends, turning into an ever-growing snowball effect. Whether it be fidget spinners and Pokemon cards or an ice bucket challenge to raise money for charity, as social creatures we feel compelled to get involved too. So with Squid Game talked about across the globe, showing up in newspaper headlines, online publications and social media feeds, it's only natural that we feel compelled to get in on the action. Given Netflix's accommodating dubbing alongside its conventional subtitles, Squid Game has gripped the world and doesn't look like slowing down anytime soon. It's all just a game. Another part of Squid Game's popularity comes from the genre it adopts. Game shows have been a mainstay on TV since the late 1930s. The first major success in the game show genre was Dr. IQ, a radio quiz show that began in 1939. During the 1950s, Japanese variants began to crop up, featuring a lot more wacky and flamboyant ideas, ranging from eating weird foods to playing weird games. Watching people making fools of themselves was and is to this day extremely entertaining, and one of the more famous examples of this comes from Takeshi's Castle. Airing in Japan between 1986 and 1990, this series soon went on to become a cult hit across the globe, with us Brits graced with the wacky narration of Craig Charles, as competitors are thrown through a series of increasingly difficult challenges. Some of those challenges will be familiar to fans of Squid Game, with specific reference to stepping stones, which sees competitors traversing a perilous set of platforms, with some prone to fall into muddy water. Since Takeshi's Castle though, there have been a number of other physical challenge game shows, including Total Wipeout, Gladiators, Ninja Warrior and Fear Factor, to name a few. The point is, this game show format remains ever popular to this day, and although shows like Alice in Borderland and Liar's Game have similar styles, both almost feel like stepping stones, no pun intended, to Squid Game's Korean influences, blending with a game show format, and featuring some recognizable faces to anyone who has been watching these dramas over the years. The perfect recipe. Ultimately, all of the above points have played a part in Squid Game's success, which is only compounded further by our current climate, with the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. Of course, we did mention these themes in our review too, which goes into a lot more detail on the show in general. Korea is no stranger to well-written TV, and with more and more people hungry to experience some of the best that Asia has to offer, Netflix looked to have a winning ticket to come out of this streaming battle royale as the victor. What do you think about Squid Game's success? Do you think it's simply sheer luck that this show has gone viral? Or do you have your own theories around what's happened? Let us know in the comments below, we'd love to hear from you. Will there be a season 2 of Squid Game? If you've watched the whole show, remember that spoiler warning above. You know the game doesn't really end with the 9th episode. It continues, and the future of winner Gi-Hun, played by Lee Ying-jae, is left uncertain. Will we ever know what happens after he gets off that plane? The answer is a resounding, probably. In a red carpet interview on November 9th, writer-director Hwang Dong-hyuk said Season 2 is indeed happening. You leave us no choice, he joked. Netflix hasn't officially confirmed anything, however, and Hwang previously told Variety he may return to big-screen movies before thinking about a Squid Game sequel. Get out the dangling piggy bank full of Korean won, Netflix, and pay the man. Until then, here are ideas for characters, games and plots we'd like to see in Squid Game Season 2. Was Squid Game based on a book? It certainly seems like Squid Game would make a great novel or graphic novel. But right now, you can't go to your bookstore and scoop up a Squid Game book to read. According to Korean pop culture site Soompi, Squid Game director Hwang Dong-hyuk said that he got the idea for the show back in 2008 from a comic book about people who were playing an extreme game. But he didn't name the comic. And it might not even be a single comic, because the director told the Korea Herald that he read a lot of comics and was mesmerized by survival games. So until Hwang comes out and names some of his reading material, guesses are all we have. It seems likely that Squid Game will now be turned into book form, since it's such a hit. Keep an eye on those bookstore shelves. Some are claiming that Squid Game is suspiciously similar to a 2014 Japanese film, As the Gods Will, directed by Takashi Miike. That film itself is based on Japanese manga. It's also about a death tournament using childhood games, and seems to have some very similar scenes, including a doll that spins around and tries to catch players moving. Squid Game's director said at a press conference that only the first game in the film is similar to his show, and that he had been working on his concept for years before As the Gods Will came out in 2014. Is Squid Game a real game? Obviously there's no deadly Squid Game tournament where people are killed playing innocent children's games. We hope. But the title refers to one specific game that gets its name from a court shaped vaguely like a squid. Main character Gi-Hun makes it sound as if Squid Game is unique to his town, describing a game that's kind of like Red Rover and kind of like Capture the Flag, and is played in a playground court shaped like a squid. In order to win, the attacking team, who are only allowed to hop until they pass the squid's waist, must tap the squid's head with their foot. Director Hwang told the Korea Herald that it was his favorite childhood game, so yes, it does seem to be real. Other games played are fairly obviously real, including marbles, tug of war, and red light green light. There's one game that's obviously not real, one in which players must cross a glass bridge and don't know which panel will shatter underfoot, though games like hopscotch do require you to place your feet only in certain squares. One game gives each player a tin of candy with a shape embossed into it, and they must use a sharp object to cut out the shape without breaking it. That's easy if you have a triangle shape, not so easy if you pick the umbrella. Contestants eventually learn that licking the back of the candy helps release the shape. The candy is popular with Korean children, the chef notes. And yes, eaters in Korea try to eat around the embossed shape without breaking it, though the stakes for them aren't life and death. Theory about Squid Game guards. The guards in Squid Game wear red, and when one's exposed, he seems like a young naive soldier. One online theory tries to explain how the guards were hired. Lead character Seong Gi-Hun plays a game called Dakji with a recruiter for the game. Dakji is a traditional Korean game of flipping paper tiles kind of like Pogs. Gi-Hun picks blue paper over red. It seems random, but one theory claims it's not. So there's a theory in Squid Game where Gi-Hun picked a blue card from the salesman, Gong-yu, and then woke up in blue suit as a player, one tweet notes. Had he or the other players picked the red card, they would be the workers' guards. There's no evidence that this is true, but hey, good fodder for a possible sequel. Is there more to explore in Squid Game? Creator Hwang Dong-hae told The Hollywood Reporter that he intentionally left Season 1's ending open-ended, but because he thought that was good closure for the story. Season 1 ends with Gi-Hun turning back and not getting on the plane to the States, he said. And that was, in fact, my way of communicating the message that you should not be dragged along by the competitive flow of society, but that you should start thinking about who has created the whole system and whether there is some potential for you to turn back and face it. So it's not necessarily Gi-Hun turning back to get revenge. It could actually be interpreted as him making a very on-the-spot eye contact with what is truly going on in the bigger picture. Hwang also said that he'd like to further explore the story of the two brothers, as well as that of the recruiter who brings Gi-Hun into the game. And, of course, we could go with Gi-Hun's story as he turns back, and explore more about how he's going to navigate through his reckoning with the people who are designing the games, he said. So, I don't know yet, but I'll just say there are a lot of possibilities out there for Season 2 storylines. He also said that, while he felt pressure now to deliver a second season, he tried to look on the bright side of their expectations. I could actually pull ideas from fans all around the world to create the next season, he said. I think that's what I'm wrestling with right now, that I shouldn't just view it as a huge amount of pressure, but think of all of this love and support I'm receiving as a big box of inspiration that I can leverage for Season 2. Why Gi-Hun doesn't get on the plane. Many are flummoxed by Gi-Hun's decision here, including LeBron James. Why doesn't he keep the prize money and live his life? And is he going to seek revenge now? What's his endgame? Creator Hwang Dong-hae told THR that he views the ending as thematically appropriate and, actually, not a cliffhanger at all. It's true that Season 1 ended in an open-ended way, Hwang said. But I actually thought that this could be good closure for the whole story too. Season 1 ends with Gi-Hun turning back and not getting on the plane to the States. And that was, in fact, my way of communicating the message that you should not be dragged along by the competitive flow of society, but that you should start thinking about who has created the system and whether there is some potential for you to turn back and face it. Hwang continued, noting that in his view, the ending doesn't set up a revenge story. So it's not necessarily Gi-Hun turning back to get revenge. It could actually be interpreted as him making a very on-the-spot eye contact with what is truly going on in the bigger picture. So I thought that might be a good, simple but ambiguous way to end this story for Gi-Hun.